I've had more than one screwed up piece of beef, and it drives a stake through my heart. Yo, steak is super expensive right now. I want to show you some really sweet ways to cook a steak and like make the most out of your meat. It's something I've learned to do over 18 years of cooking. I want to share it with you. We're gonna pan fry this sucker. Luke, I am your father. Pan frying a piece of meat is hard, but it's really, really good. If you've never really pan fried a steak before, you can try, you can start. It's amazing. If you're comfortable on a barbecue, go for that. I want to show you a bunch of other steps around cooking it that can really help you nail it. I'm using this giant carbon steel pan made in Germany by a company called Turk. They're just a big gnarly piece of steel, but they're so good at cooking. Step one, I bought the meat that I could afford, and this is pretty nice. It's a nice strip loin steak, so it's gonna work well just in a pan. It's been sitting here in this water and it's wet age, so I'm gonna start by putting the meat in this pan that's got sort of a mesh draining insert, and I'm gonna salt the meat. I want the meat to absorb the salt, and I want that blood flavor inside the meat to oxidize. It'll dry out, it'll cook a little bit nicer when it's dry, but it's also gonna taste better. I would not use fine table salt. It'll suck right into the meat and really make the meat salty. Something in the grind of like a kosher salt is good, not like a coarse pickling salt. So I'm gonna evenly coat the outside of this steak with salt. That's it, I've got a nice little dusting of salt on the outside of the steak and on both sides. I'm gonna put this in the fridge overnight. I'm not gonna cover it. Okay, welcome back, it's 24 hours later. Okay, maybe not. This is a different steak. But what we've done is we've salted this steak the same way and let it sit in a mesh tray like this overnight. The mesh tray is important because it allows the air to circulate and the meat to dry out nice and evenly. If it sits on something solid, like the bottom of the dish, it's not gonna dry out. Now, before I cook this, I'm gonna take it out of the fridge. I'm gonna let it sit on the counter for probably 2 hours. I want it to get up to room temperature. That way, when I sear it and cook it, it will cook evenly. It won't have that cold meat hitting the hot pan, dropping the temperature of the pan. It'll cook way more evenly that way. You can see how the salt and the air have dried out the surface of the meat. That means it's gonna sear really nicely, and you can see how bright red the meat is now. That's that oxidizing happening inside the meat, and it's going to make it taste meatier. This is all happening because of science.
Science rules.
We're gonna put a bunch of oil in this pan. It's gonna seem a little bit oily, but that's what we gotta do because it's a big surface. We gotta get her covered. I'm waiting to make sure the oil is hot enough. I'm starting to see these like little phantom ripples inside the pan, so it's probably pretty close. A little hotter. I don't really want it to smoke. Burning the oil, especially if you got a gas stove, you really don't want to light the oil inside the pan on fire. That'll make your steak taste like diesel. Trying to hold it down so I get a nice even connection of the meat on the pan. I just want to make sure we got a nice solid connection, so I push down on the meat a little bit. Sometimes when it hits a hot pan, it like the meat kind of jumps and tries to get away from the heat. So you just got to squish it down. You don't want to flip it over and over again. You do want to have that sear and that caramelization happen on the meat at the frying pan. So you kind of got to let it do its thing. You know, it's not always about you. So let it do its thing. You can watch it come up the sides a little bit. You can see some color on the edges. It means there's likely more on the edges than in the middle. So again, just make sure it's touching on the bottom. Something that's super handy for doing stuff like this, especially like on a barbecue or in a frying pan, is these things. They're a chef press. You can get a couple of them, you stack them up, and you put the weight on it. That way you can let it sit with the weight on top, and you don't have to have your hand over top the splattering oil. I do like a little bit of pain though. It makes me feel real. I'm gonna burn myself with my steak. My mom took away my Nintendo. Woo! Look at that. Mama! These pans are so awesome. That is a hard sear. Gonna go really quickly now. You got a lot of heat going on in here. I don't want to overcook this guy. We got a nice bit of color on the other side already. Just get a little bit more. There's so much heat inside the pan, it's gonna go into the meat really fast too. I'm gonna take the piece of meat out, put it back in a tray that can drain properly, but I wanna let it rest at least 50% of the amount of time I spent cooking it. I think of meat like a sponge, and when it's hot in the frying pan, it's like it's tight and squeezed up, and that's gonna push all the liquid out of the muscle. So you wanna let it relax and reabsorb all that liquid, and that's what resting does. Even if you overcook your steak, if you let it rest, it'll still be moist. All right, we're letting our steak rest. I'm gonna mash up some garlic and some sesame in the sriracha grinder with this dope-ass pepperwood pestle. Add some hot butter. We're gonna make sweet sesame garlic butter. This thing is so great. It has such wicked texture on the sides. All right, that's it. I just wanna smash it up. Okay, roasted sesame seeds. That should be good. Oh, you can just hear them popping in there, mixing with the garlic. Oh yeah. All right, I get a bit of salt in there, mostly because I want the abrasiveness of the salt to help break these guys down a bit. But this sriracha grinder is so awesome. Oh my God. Well, bang. I got hot butter. It's not clarified. I want all that delicious butter solids in here too. So mix it up a little bit. How much do we need? We need that much. Oh, yeah. That smells so good. Steak, sesame garlic butter, roasted sesame garlic butter. Let's be serious. Okay, that's it. It's rested for a while. You can learn how to figure out how your steak is done on your own. Use a thermometer, learn to squeeze it and feel the thing. I don't know, do that thing if you want. But I try to not just push from the top, but I also will try and squeeze from the sides. Just another way of feeling the resistance from the meat. That's it, it's cooked. We're just gonna slice it up. Oh, yes. And this is a nice, medium rare steak. We're gonna drown this guy in butter. At the end, a little pepper. I prefer pepper at the end. Do what you want. I just like the aromatic of the freshly ground pepper as it hits the heat of the steak and the butter. That's it. Simple. We don't need to do all sorts of crazy stuff. I would say buy the best meat you can afford, but frankly, it's all really expensive. So if you do decide to spring on a piece of meat, take your time and do it right. Give it a good night to salt it and let the air get in there and dry it out a little bit. Warm it up before it hits the frying pan because it'll sear better and cook nice and evenly. Take your time, do it right, and enjoy it. Oh yeah, that doesn't taste like shit at all. So that's just a real base recipe. You can swap out the sesame for other stuff. You can put in herbs or, pine nuts, whatever you like. You can baste it with butter instead of basting it with the oil like I did. When you're basting it, you can smash a clove of garlic and put a sprig of something like thyme or rosemary or whatever you want in there. There's so many combinations, and that's what's so fun about it. It's like a really kind of like a choose your own adventure, and sometimes it's just like an adventure in saying, well, what's in my cupboard that I've got to use? Try it out, right? Don't overthink it. And as you do this more frequently, you get a better sense of the temperature you cook it to, the temperature of your frying pan. So if you want to work on getting good at it, keep some of the variables the same. Use the same frying pan, use the same stove, and try to keep it consistent, and you'll start to notice that you'll really get an intuition about when it's cooked, and you'll really start to nail it time and again. So I'm sorry guys, but you're gonna have to practice eating steak. I enjoyed that. And if you didn't, please let us know in the comments. But honestly, like, if you have sweet ideas on how you cook steak, great tips on how to make your money go a little further when you're cooking something pricey like a steak, yeah, put it in there, share it, let's hear it. Eat it, eat it. Okay, bye, see you next time. I was a steak for 18 years.